I've started on the enclosure, as you can see. This is the bottom and 3 of the 4 sides. The 4th side is where you actually solder the LEDs to and the jumper cable, a few resistors and so on and so forth. But I've just got this together with sticky tape for the moment. The manual says rubber bands, but I don't know how many rubber bands, so I thought I'd just put some sticky tape together. So what I'll do is get the components installed on this, and then we'll come back and see that there's just a few components on there, a couple of resistors, a couple of LEDs, and the jumper cable. So anyway, I'll get that all installed and we'll come back. So the first step is to put the LEDs in together with the bezels that come with it. So from this side of the board, which is the inside of the board, excuse the light here, let me just move that over a little bit. So the yellow LEDs on the left and the green LEDs on the right, and the longer lead is towards the center. So anyway, next step involves bending down those leads to these two. Let me just zoom in a bit. So it's bending down the leads to these 2 parts right here. So we've got 4 connections to make for each of the 2 LEDs. So I'll go and do that and come back. Okay, so I've done the LEDs, and you can see them, they're bent over and soldered in, and I've also done the 2 1K resistors here, although that one on the left, the right lead of the left resistor looks a bit sketchy, so I might touch that one up. So anyway, that's the LEDs and the resistors on. I'll just touch up that resistor on the left there. Okay, so that resistor's touched up. The next step is to install this ribbon cable, blue at the bottom, to these 6 connections here. Note that this is an 8-way cable, so you can discard the white and the black wires at the top of this, and then solder the remaining wires. Again, blue at the bottom here connecting to 6. So I'll go and do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so that's the ribbon cable attached. Now, I always find these ribbon cables are not the strongest mechanically. They do have a very thin wire at the center, so you've got to be super careful when you're bending them. They will come off. What I sometimes do is just put a daub of hot glue on the plastic portion of the wire there to sort of reduce the strain on the wire. But anyway, that's that complete, and we can move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step is to install, there's 2 of these little mini switches that come with the kit. Install them in these 2 positions right here. Solder them on the reverse side and make sure you kind of line them up. They will move around a little bit. So I'll go ahead and do that and come back. Okay, so that's done. They're in relatively straight and soldered in from behind there. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step is to install this header that comes with the kit into J5. So I'll go ahead and do that and come straight back. Just put on some tape to hold it down while I solder it in. I'll get that soldered in, and then we'll come right back. Okay, so there's the finished connection between the front panel and the phaser. And the manual does have which pin goes to where. It's not a simple straight through mapping here. So just refer to the manual, but if you're going by the colors here, so if you look at the panel colors, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, brown, on the phaser going from inside to out is brown, yellow, blue, green, orange, red. So there's those 2 arrangements right there. So what I'll do now is just check to make sure that the connections are right by probing around a few spots, ground, 3.3 volts, and so on and so forth, just to double check. So let's check the important ground and voltage first. So here's ground right here on the front panel, and that should have conductivity with right here. So that's good. Now let's check voltage. So voltage is on the front panel, it's pin 1. So front panel's pin 1 right here. And then to check voltage, we should basically probe right here. So that confirms both ground and voltage are correct at the moment. So I'll move on to now to checking the switches and LEDs. Okay, so let's check the switches now, and I'm kind of doing this behind the camera, so forgive me. So S1 should be this pin right here of the pick. So that's good. And S2 on the non-grounded side should be this pin right here, second from the end. So there we go. That confirms both the switches are connected correctly. Okay, so let's check the LEDs now. Excuse the arms in the way. So just checking at the schematic, the yellow LED should go to pin 8 of the pick controller. So obviously you take it the other side of the resistor. There, I hope you can see that. And pin 8 is right down the bottom here. Alright, so that's good. And then finally, the green LED is pin 11 on the pick, which is 8, 9, 10, 11, this one right here. So we're good. So that confirms all the connectivity. I mean, obviously, pay attention to that. Last thing you want to do is connect ground to voltage or vice versa or something like that. So what I'll do now is I'll plug in the plug in the phaser and just make sure that those LEDs are lighting up correctly. Okay, first test here, turn it on, and there's the green LED lighting up. So that confirms green LED, that confirms power, ground. Haven't tested the switches yet, that's what I'll do next. Okay, so just a quick test of the switches here, so let's click on Alt. That confirms that. Back to FT8, that confirms that. So that's all the switches, the LEDs and power and ground. So that confirms that front panel is connected correctly. So what I'll move on to next is actually soldering up the remainder of the enclosure. And as soon as I've done that, I'll come back. So basically, that's the completed soldering on the inside. As you can see there, I just tacked it in. I don't think you need to go crazy here. It doesn't need to be that mechanically rigorous. So, and while I was soldering in, I did keep it. I did keep the front panel connections in place. I didn't want to unhook them and rehook them. So the next step is to put these spacers in. And they go in the four corners of the enclosure there. Now these don't have anything to do with the board itself. The board kind of just floats in the enclosure and is held in place with the nut that goes on the BNC connection. So that was a bit confusing for me at start. So what I'll do is I'll get these four spacers in, get the feed on, and then come back. So there are the four aluminium spacers screwed in. Pretty simple. You just put the foot on, put a screw through it, and then tighten it up. Doesn't have to be super tight. What I'll move on to next is there is an off-on switch right here, which allows you to turn the radio off and on. And the place for that goes is, if you remember way back to the beginning of the build, excuse my arm there, it goes right here. So there's this little header right here where is a convenient location for applying power, and so what I'll do is I'll install that switch next, and then we'll come back. So there's the switch installed into those two header pins there. So I guess the final test is to clear all the possible shorts out the way and connect this up. Let's see if we have a success here. Okay, just being a bit careful, being a bit ginger here, but there we go. Clicking the button turns that green LED on. So that's the switch installed. What I'll move on to next is putting this into the enclosure and then checking to see everything's okay. So anyway, I guess you might realise at this point that I've made a bit of a blunder, and that is now I can't get the off-on switch through because it comes through from that side. I thought it actually came through from this side, but I'm wrong. So what I'll do is I'll desolder this and then connect this from the outside and put it back in. So anyway, I'll do that right away. Okay, so there's the finished enclosure. Might just plug it in and just make sure everything is still working. There's that power right there. Okay, so let's turn it on. There we go. So obviously the real test is to get this on the air and make sure that that everything's still working. So I'll go and do that, and then we can complete this build. Okay, so here's the phaser setup connected to my end fed as before, and called CQ and got a response straight away. This time K9DN. Hello out there, K9DN, if you happen to stumble across this video. So that's the enclosure built. That's the phaser built. Obviously, there's a whole calibration. There's alternate frequencies you can broadcast on, but that's all in the manual. I won't be covering that. I'll wrap this video series for now, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get some good FT8 action going yourself. So anyway, that's a wrap for now. Bye-bye.